Your source for all things Texas Tech. This is the Ask Level podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome into another episode of the Ask Level podcast. This podcast, as usual, brought to you by our friends at Cantex Roofing and Construction.
I'm Mike Hebert, owner of Cantex Roofing and Construction. Every day is game day, and we'll get it right when it comes to your roofing, construction, windows, and mirrors. Call Cantex Roofing and Construction today. Together, we are one serving you.
I'm Chois Woodman with the one and only Chris Level. Hey, you've been around a winning basketball team quite a bit, which I'm sure it's your good luck rubbing off. That's why it's happening. But Red Raiders successful there. We've got quite a few questions. There's a baseball question, basketball, quite a few basketball questions, a couple of football questions. So we'll be question heavy level. It's hard to say. Level, what's up, man?
you talked yourself into a circle there. Yeah,
I
it was
did.
like you just and then you do like I do sometimes where you just stop talking so there's no more mistakes that happen.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm doing good. A bit of a winning streak right now for Grant's guys, and now in the top 25, and starting to get a little notoriety for it, but still a long way to go here. But you're in a pretty good spot. Fourth place by yourself in the Big 12 standings at 6-2, and I guess after this week, you'll make the turn. You'll be officially halfway through, and if
Right.
I mean, I don't want to necessarily, don't hold me to this. However, if you win both of these this week, I guess I'm prepared to say that if you win on Wednesday versus TCU, and then you go to Houston and win, I mean, I'd be willing to walk home.
You'd be willing to walk home?
Yeah, like I mean it'd be one of the biggest upsets in the sport this entire season.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think of something like, very, very outside the box or whatever. Like, I mean, it's going to take a lot. And please don't make me walk home. But I'm willing to sacrifice if you can go down there and get a good whistle and play what will take arguably your best game and all that, and beat the Cougs. But it's a good little stretch right now, man.
Yep. I do want to dive into that matchup, and as well as the TCU one coming up in just a little bit. But what you've been doing lately, Tech has won 4 games in a row. Obviously, you're at a streak of 6 out of 7. Your only loss during that stretch is a 1-point loss to a top 5 team in Iowa State that you lost in Lubbock. So you're doing things right. And I think what's been pretty interesting level to me is that it hasn't been the same formula every time. You're doing it in so many different ways. Some nights it's JT Toppin looking really good. Some nights you're shooting the ball well from the outside. A lot of the nights, maybe the only common denominator during this stretch is you've played pretty darn good defense the whole time.
Yeah, and the other thing, you're right. It hasn't been the same formula or same path to victory in each of these games. I think sometimes you're more defensive oriented. Sometimes you really get hot, or the offensive part of what you do really shows up. You absolutely have improved defensively, collectively. And, some nights you've battled foul trouble. Other nights it's just like there's this massive scoring drought, and you just shut I mean, to play back-to-back Big 12 games to where you don't allow a single point in the last 5 minutes of the game is insanity. About as insane as winning 17 one-score games in a row like Pat Mahomes and your beloved Chiefs have done.
My goodness.
But I would say this too. I think that what because you're 6-1 in January, which obviously doesn't count the one on the 31st of December against UCF, but you are 6-1 in January, which is true. But you are some of these games you haven't played well. and you still won. And I think that's also a sign of a good team.
Yeah,
I
I
think there's
agree.
a lot of games where you come away going, man, I don't know if you played particularly well in spurts or just generally speaking, and yet that's I think that's a big time positive for you, and you've done it really in the last bit of these last three games or so without Darion Williams really being a heavy, contributing factor to it because of injury or just not playing well, and yet it hasn't mattered. So yeah, there's different ways you can get the result, and I think that's certainly a positive. But boy, you still got a long way to go, and there's starting to be some wear and tear here. Darion, I hope he's okay. It's just like that ankle clearly not right. He's shooting about 27% from three in Big 12 games, and there's just there's just some things going on that it just keeps happening where he hasn't been able to finish the games because he just takes a fall, and so yeah,
Sure.
he's clearly playing at less than 100%, but uh, we'll see if you can't keep it going.
That's the hard thing is even when you go on a good stretch in this league, it can dissipate quickly because of how tough the league
There's
is.
always there's always somebody sitting there waiting on you, like
Always.
because after that's why this TCU game is so big for
Yes.
you
Yes.
because your next three, two of which are on the road, is about as tough of a stretch as you're going to have all season long because you've got trips to Houston and to Tucson, which are two of the top four teams in the league, and then the one of your toughest games at home on paper anyway is Baylor, which is kind of a fringe top 25 team, and they're starting to kind of figure it out a little bit. Their freshmen are starting to grow up, and so that's why when you play an Oklahoma State or a TCU, you better take advantage because it's going to get harder. And there's some games on the back end on the other side of that little three-game stretch where, on paper anyway, it
Hmm.
looks manageable. But that's ask West Virginia about playing games on paper when they upset Iowa State
Yep.
at home, and then they turn around 2 or 3 days later and they drop one to Arizona State at home,
Not great.
which is at the bottom of the standings. And yeah. So.
Yeah. So let's start right there with the Texas Tech Red Raiders and the basketball side of things level. Um, the first question comes in from Kelly. It says, "Why is EY or what is keeping EY Yalaho from getting any minutes right now?"
Yeah, I think that maybe in a best case scenario that because I think if Devin Cambridge was on your team still, I think you would have a 9-man rotation. I would be curious as to see what the minute distribution would look like
Okay.
if that were the case. Somebody would get squeezed there, and I think you would have some different options on going big or small. And you could also make the argument that that has actually helped out your team and that it's made Grant's job easier on having to make some choices. It's like, well, I mean, no brainer. Like we have no choice but to play these guys or this group together because we don't, because sometimes you can pick wrong. Like, man, I should have had this group in there instead of this one, whatever. But I would have been curious to see whose minutes would get squeezed. And so I guess what I'm saying is that when Cambridge does exit the equation here, you would have thought that maybe EY would soak up some of those minutes.
Right.
You could just tell that I think the concern there is like what can he do and do consistently, and what minutes could he give you that are productive that Toppin or Federico are not giving you.
Right.
And that's I mean, because Federico, at times, he's been really good. At times, you could tell, okay, this is moving a bit fast for him and all those things. He's dealing with a shoulder issue. I just wonder if EY could move well enough on defense and could keep up. And there may come a time, like I just mentioned, that where it's necessitated to you. Like, okay, we don't have any choice. He's got to play some. But the thing about young players is this is what coaches do. They, throughout the course of the season, you put them in 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 scenarios in practices. The kids that aren't playing, Leon Horner, EY, Jack Francis, all these types of guys at various points in the season, and you'll put them in 2-on-2 and 3-on-3 scenarios to let them play and to where all the coaches watch and all those things. And then they make some of the mistakes that
Yep.
you see why they're not playing, and then they kind of go, okay, I get it. I mean, I understand. Like we're working on this. This is a big picture deal and all that. So, but that's what I would offer up there. I still have hopes, big picture, but you start to look at it and you just wonder, is he long for this deal? Is there more that he can give you come this time next year to where he is a piece of your rotation, but it's got to start on the defensive end of the floor. Yeah, that's really where he's going to earn his way if he's ever going to factor in here heavily.
So as we move on to look at what you've got on the schedule this week,
And
obviously,
and real quick, what
go on.
may hurt EY big
Yep.
picture? What do you think I'm going to say?
I'm not sure. What's in front of him? I don't
Well,
know.
what's I mean, for him personally, some of the worst news, just again, for him personally, I don't think it is for the basketball program, is that Federico can come back next year.
Oh yeah, because of the
Yeah, and
JUCO
then you've
stuff.
got you've
Yeah.
got Mariel Akuntak that's sitting there, that's
Yeah.
long and athletic and kind of a different player, maybe more of a bit of a two-way player and
Yeah.
all that. And you're going to go bring in somebody that will likely replace like a Toppin. And so, it's just there's only so many minutes. So that's
Right.
just why you start to do the math there and start looking around and like that news about Federico may not necessarily be great for EY, but we'll see. I don't pretend to know
Sure.
what all that will look like. And heck, 2 weeks from now, you may go, how about the games that EY is playing? Somebody went down and he filled in because I mean he was playing meaningful minutes
He was.
at the tail end of the tail end of the regular season last year because of the injuries to Warren Washington and whatnot.
Yep. No doubt. To look ahead to this week, you obviously have the game against TCU and then the road trips to Houston. Um, Kelly asked for actually predictions for Houston and Arizona games. We may not get that far ahead, but the the TCU game feel I hate labeling things as must win, but I guess in the lens of if you want to stay in any sort of conference title hunt or want to stay relevant as a higher seed for the NCAA tournament, I guess is that where this game is tabbed as a must win for you on Wednesday night to make sure you protect home court. It feels like you've already lost the one that you shouldn't lose or can't lose at home against UCF. So
Yeah, well, and it's crazy because at the time you didn't really know that.
yeah,
That's what's. But I would play it out this way. I could say to you that if you get that one, maybe you go split those games in Utah. That's just kind of,
sure,
I
sure.
think in a way that loss to UCF was great for you. Boy, it got your attention.
It
It
might have
certainly
been.
got the head coach's attention, and he's still not let go of it. He still holds on to that and tries to have that edge and all that stuff. I would say though that there's only so many games you get where you're like you need to take advantage and every game is an opportunity, but yeah, this is one that it's just kind of, if you're serious about being a conference championship contender, certainly is a
Yes,
game you have to have, but that's gonna take a lot,
it would.
and that may include a win in Tucson and at least one win over Houston, regardless of where you get it. And
Yeah.
and then you still need help. And if you go win in Tucson and beat Houston, regardless of where the location is, you're in feeling pretty darn good about life, just because your resume would whew. So
But I mean, you
those
look at what at the if you're starting to just go through and count wins and losses, and it's impossible to do in this league.
yeah, and be careful. I
It
know.
is. It is. It's for exercise for guys like you and me, and obviously not the team or the coaches. But if you go through and count, I mean, you can legitimately talk yourself into a 13-7 or 14-6 record. I mean, you can go through and I mean, because you're sitting at 6-2 right now, sole
Yeah,
place.
I think based on what's left, with without knowing the injury component or whatever, I think if you get to 13-7, I think is very realistic. Very realistic. And maybe a bit better than that, what you're saying.
Yeah.
But there's, the biggest challenge Grant has, and every coach in this league has, is how do I get the best out of my guys every night?
Hmm.
Because you see it on a Sunday in a weird time or a weird day, whatever, kind of a weird atmosphere against a team you were heavily favored to beat. And you're up 18 with about nine and change to go, and then it just kind of you're just trying to get to the end. Okay. Then you turn right around, you're going to play TCU it's 6 o'clock, not conducive to have the best home court environment.
Sure.
Again, against a team you're probably supposed to beat. Although this one, they'll be better than Oklahoma State, and they just went to Waco and won. But and it's just you got West Virginia coming in here, and Arizona State coming in here, and Colorado coming in here, and these teams are all good, like on the right night, I should say. And that's what is scary, because if you show up and you don't have it, that's when you get got, and it's just hard to squeeze everything out of your kids and have them at their best every night. That's why I say the best compliment I can give this team so far is that they haven't played well at times and are still winning. I think that's a really good sign going forward.
Yeah, I think the 13-7, 14-6 type of conversation isn't crazy at all. That's 7-5 down the stretch to get to 13-7, and be 8-4, which is a little more a taller of a task to get to 14-6. But Level, if you did get into that range, what does that look like? Someone did ask about a tournament projection. Why is bracketology have Tech so low when the net has Tech so high? So,
Well, I just love that. I mean, we hadn't even played half the conference schedule yet, and we're already getting to where you're going to be seated. There's still
oh, it's
so much to go, and it won't necessarily play out as expected. It could be better, it could be worse, could be somewhere in between.
things rarely
That's
do. Yeah,
the beauty of sports, right?
yeah, yeah,
And but what you have to understand is at some point you will more than likely there's some punishment to be had for you and your resume based on what you don't have in the non-conference. That's just
yeah.
is what it is. Now, if you go win the regular season Big 12 championship, I think that a lot of that gets looked over. But when you start breaking ties, and I've got to pick
Sure.
between this set of teams and seed them on this line versus this line,
Yep.
that's the kind of stuff that breaks the tie, not in your favor, because you have one of the worst non-conference schedules metrics of anybody in the country. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is. And like DePaul is one of your better wins, and I think they're like they're 500 and they're like 2-9 in the league or something. I mean, there's just nothing there that will pay
Yeah.
you any dividends. And Syracuse is not very good. And that's, had you beaten A&M, and again, you didn't have JT Top in there, and that isn't factored into stuff. If you had you beaten A&M, that would be one that would have a chance to pay some dividends for you, even though they just blew a 22-point lead
Ooh.
against Texas, and Rodney Terry acted like a huge hypocrite. But yeah,
No, not that guy. We want
yeah,
class, Level. We want class.
yeah. But
Wait, that was back when he was in the Big
I
12. He wanted class. SEC
I
is
dig.
fine.
I was about to say I digress.
All right.
Yeah. So I mean, a 13-7, you're probably in the 5, 6, 7 range. Last year you were a 6 seed. I think if memory serves, you played the 11
Correct.
seeded NC State.
Oh, yeah, you did.
Rutro.
Yeah, six
Yeah.
seed, and you finished in a tie for third place in the league. So,
Yes. Yes. So
there's no guarantees. Leah asks a couple of Houston-esque questions. She said, after watching the Houston-Kansas game, can anyone beat Houston? Also, did Adams send Malik Wilson away, or was Wilson unhappy here? In my opinion, he's one of our regrettable ones that got away.
if Houston stays healthy, they're going to be extremely difficult to beat. They are almost impossible to beat at home. They have the longest winning streak in the country. I think they've won like 31 or 32 straight. And if you go in and Fog Allen, that's the holy grail of road wins. It's just extremely difficult
Sure. Yeah.
to win there. And yeah, at some point, people need to having conversations about that game being as much about Kansas as it was about Houston, because if any other coach chokes that one away, they're heavily criticized. And Bill Self, man, they couldn't even get the ball inbounded, not once but twice.
Bad.
Get a 5 second call, and then all they have to do is just throw it to the tallest guy on the floor. He has to catch it, and then you more than likely get fouled, and we're having a different conversation. But they can't even execute that, and so that's was weird. It looked like the roles were reversed. This looked like the home team looked
Yes.
like the road team in this scenario. That's I mean that typically Kansas takes advantage of the miracle at home. Instead, they were on the wrong side of it. But this Houston team, they're physical, they're deep. Their best offense is they want to outshoot you volume wise. So they have a weight room there and they use it. And it's just they're going to try to they're I mean it's gonna be a lot. It feels like there's 6 or 7 guys playing defense out there at times. They are fanatical about those 50-50 balls. And when the ball is up on the glass, fanatical about going to get it. And then with putbacks, Juwan Roberts he's really started to flourish in his 6th year, to where he's really starting to score and a little more polish there. And to answer your question about Malik Wilson, yeah, I essentially this is what happened. Essentially, like you kind of made not necessarily a trade, but it was your choice, or the previous staff's choice, Mark Adams mainly, to let Malik Wilson go. Felt like they needed more shooting. Okay, and Malik is not a good shooter. Although don't it's difficult to say that after he buried a three to send the game into double overtime on the road, and he switched to three. His jump shot is not his strength. His athleticism, his
Fair
defense, all
way to
that
put it.
stuff. But you kind of made the swap and sent Malik out and brought Kerwin Walton in.
Yeah.
That's kind of, I mean, that's essentially what happened.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was crazy. I'm like, wait a second. This has nothing to do with Kerwin Walton, but I always thought it was strange. Like, wait a second. Kelvin Sampson and the University of Houston, they can use Malik Wilson, but you can't.
Right.
I was just, he would be your best on-ball defender. He would be, he's a culture guy. He never said a word. He was a great teammate, and he's a great teammate now. And it was our loss, or Texas Tech's loss, was absolutely Houston's game. But yeah, I'm a big fan of that kid, and he may be Houston's just best overall athlete. He can jump out of the gym. Hey, remember, he's the guy who was in San Diego in the NCAA tournament, and he did the 360
Hmm.
dunk at the very end of the game, at the end of your first round game. And I can't remember, they called a travel on him, but he just like whopped up and was like, and boom. I mean, he's just
Oh
a
yeah.
freak. Block shots, guards, deflects. I mean, everything that Mark Adams would have liked, but they wanted more shooting. And so he couldn't do that very well. So they brought in Kerwin Walton.
It was good to see him getting going a little bit this weekend. Hopefully he can.
Made a couple of threes.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's highly flammable for sure.
Yep. Okay. I'm gonna sneak a baseball question in before a couple of football, and this is just kind of a generic one. Mark asks, any insight on this year's squad? Seems like Tadlock's embraced the transfer portal a little bit more this year than in the past.
I mean, this is your department, not mine. But you're what, picked fifth out of
Fifth.
a
Yep.
14 team league.
Fifth in the preseason poll.
So, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, tell me about their pitching, and we'll decide if you're going to be any good or not. I
And
mean,
I think
that's really,
for me
yeah.
personally, that's the biggest question mark heading into the season. I think you've got arms. Yeah.
Which is not the question you want to be
I
asking.
guess when I say a question mark, it's not a negative thing. I think it can be answered positively. It's just
Unproven.
unproven. That's a perfect way to put it. Yeah. I think you've got some young arms that Coach Tadlock really likes left over from last year. You had to throw some freshmen into the fire. If you can get maturity out of that, then you'll be a lot better. And you've added some pieces from the transfer portal. There's no doubt Coach Tadlock used the portal a lot more this year because you saw so many other teams last year do just that and have success with it by just having older teams. And I think in baseball that helps out quite a bit. So I think you're going to have some good position battles, and I think Tech will be a top five team in this league. Now you can be anywhere from 1 to 5, but I don't foresee it being a season like you struggled with last year. I'd be surprised if that happened a second year in a row.
And like everything else, man, it just comes down to health and how lucky you get. I mean, you
And
end up with it just seems like the Texas Tech, for whatever reason, like for the last decade, it seems like quarterbacks around here, but like inevitably you're going to see some pitcher that's kind of rolling along, and then all of a sudden
yeah,
he's not going to pitch one weekend, and then you're going to get some press release that says, "Yeah, we're gonna kind of shut this guy down for a little bit," and then you start to hear murmurs like,
mm, yeah,
"Uh-oh."
yeah,
And that's just typically the way it's gone. I mean, it's PTSD, but I feel like I've lived that same life for
a
a
lot.
decade plus around here. Yeah.
Way too much, way too much. So hopefully they can
Yep.
stay a little healthier this year. Okay, shifting over to football. Let's get our obligatory Micah Hudson question out of the way. I thought we were past these, but apparently not, because rumors and swirling all over the message boards and that sort of thing. Paolo says, "Boys, I've been living under a rock when it comes to sports at any level. Got on Twitter to see that Micah Hudson is rumored to return to Texas Tech. Any truth to that? And is it allowed so soon?" There we go.
Well, I mean, it's possible. I would not rule it out. I can't say that it's likely or unlikely. I think that the funny thing is this thing just kind of took on a life of its own. As you and I are sitting here talking, the reality is he's not even in the portal. I don't believe, and again, maybe this changed 15 minutes prior to us taping, but is my understanding
Sure.
just before I guess we were, he doesn't even have his release from A&M yet, which I think he would need because he's got to have a release because it's a binded financial aid agreement. Semantics, it probably can get that done. And then at that point, is this where he would come? Is it elsewhere? Do you want him back? There's all kinds of, and so I guess the best way to answer that is that it's potentially true, but there may be zero truth to it. So I think we're a ways off from ultimately deciding because what I would say is I don't know, the betting favorite is that maybe he's nowhere this spring semester and he gets things sorted out, whatever that would entail, and ends up being somewhere new in May or June or whatever it was for summer and all that stuff. As far as yeah, I mean, I get maybe I'll just leave it there. But I don't know. Is there anything else that
There was one more just asking, was there any truth to him being in Lubbock?
I
That
believe that
was
was true?
circulating.
Yes,
Okay.
I believe that. I believe so. Yes.
So there you go. Yeah. And I'm sure we will get more Micah Hudson questions as we Micah Hudson's been probably the most popular topic for over a year where we get questions
Yep.
forever and will continue to do so. But we get it.
Yep.
Okay, here's this one level. I like this question from who's this from? This one's from Rob. It says, "Are there any impact freshmen for the football team this coming season that you think will have an impact like Jacoby Williams did this year? And what about redshirt freshmen?"
Well, the true freshman is going to be very difficult because the very reason you go to the portal
Mhm.
is so you don't have to go that route. I mean, you are hitting direct needs when you go to the portal, so
Yep.
you don't have to play freshmen. Now, I don't know if you're recruiting class. I mean, you got some receivers, obviously, Leighton Stone and Michael Deaver are already on campus. They were at the bowl game. I think your quarterback, which I could have talked myself into. I mean, could you squint a bit and say, okay, could you have used him in certain ways or whatever? But he comes in dinged up.
Right.
having to rehab all summer and after hurting his knee, his senior season. So at this point, I'm going to say I'm not ready to answer that question yet because I would say, but I don't want to just tell you no. But I don't think that is likely, and it's because of the portal party you had in early and mid-December. Okay,
Yeah.
so there's a direct correlation there. And
Yeah.
as far as red shirt, I think that is going to be an interesting question that will be answered this spring because I could envision that some of your offensive linemen push. They won't necessarily start, but rotational guys, depth guys.
Hmm.
But some of these redshirt freshmen could be, I guess theoretically, could be going through their last spring here, if based on the numbers and all that. So there probably is some of these guys that you need to be taking a step forward
Hmm.
in our eyes and develop and do the right thing and not be a squeaky wheel and
Right.
all the stuff, or we are going to choose not to sit and wait on you and we've got to give your spot to somebody else kind of deal. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I'm trying to think like off the top of my head though.
What about any of those receivers? I mean, we've heard
Well, I mean,
Turner,
yeah,
we've heard Valson.
Valson, Tyson Turner. I mean, those guys are, and then obviously because I think that they may use Jacoby Williams like in the slot as well as that running back. I I mean, when you graduated, Dre McCray, Jordan Brown left. I guess Brady Boyd left. But
Yeah.
there's some spots and some time on the field available to be had from some of that next wave.
Yeah.
Um, TJ West is another one. Obviously DJ Crest, he left on the portal, and so and then you've got these freshmen. So there's kind of a group there that may have a chance. I just other than Turner and Volson, I don't know if I would. But those are right now those are rotational pieces. I don't know if
Sure.
you would look to anybody to start or anything like that. These are good players too, mind you. They've got people in front of them or need to develop or whatever the case may be. But um, you didn't lose any linebacker. I think you had to desperately add defensive linemen because
Yeah.
I mean, like, what's the health status of Dylan Spencer? I would love to tell you that he would be
Good
ready to
question.
make the
Yeah.
move, but he didn't play last year because of an injury. And so I don't know.
Yeah, and honestly, the question's kind of interesting the way it's worded, like Jacoby Williams. Because if this question was asked this time last year about incoming freshmen, I don't think Jacoby Williams would have been one that you would have tabbed as an impact player. I mean, you might have said the running back in front of him, um, but I don't know, in Cam Dickey, but I don't know that Williams would have been on there. So a lot of times you get these guys to campus and coaches like, wow, he's more ready than I expected him to be at this time.
The other name that I may offer up, although he finished out the season hurt, I don't think it was major in nature, but like remember the name of Trey Jackson.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he was a tight end out of
I
South
didn't.
Oak Cliff. Freak athlete and has gained some weight, and he'll needs to gain more. And obviously, he would be more of a third tight end in a scenario that you would view with John Carlos Miller and obviously Carter the Goat as he goes by on Twitter. That
The
you're
goat.
one of your new
Yeah.
signees via the portal. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's another one potentially.
All right, squeeze one more question in here. This and it kind of links into what you're talking about, the roster limits. It says if the roster limits do get approved, what is going to happen to all the walk-ons on Tech's roster?
They'll get. I mean, well, I mean, it's. I think that everybody, like from a walk-on to a scholarship player, it doesn't really matter. I just think that, you're going to trim it to 105. I do think this gets approved. We're not there yet, but this is the way everybody's going to operate until further notice. And I mean, you're just going to have to make cuts. You're
So
gonna have to make cuts.
if I'm correct on this number, I believe Tech's at 114 going into the spring, or like
And so you're gonna basically what I'm telling you is, and see, and that what's the tricky part, the gray area here is that, see, you've got guys like Chapman Lewis, I think got pretty dinged up in that bowl game. Well, he's not even going to play in the spring, and I don't know
yeah,
when he'll be ready in the fall. But see, he counts a spot.
that
Dylan
hurts.
Spencer was another question, like a Duda Banks who
Yeah,
had. I mean, we can keep going with all these names, but those count as spots, even though we may not be able to see them or you can't actually use them. I mean, that's still counting as a spot. So your special teams depth, your ability to have five quarterbacks, your ability to have multiple snappers and all this kind of stuff. I think versatility will be at a premium. And if
sure.
you it's like those NFL rosters, it's like, dude, if he can do this and this, like, it gives you just much more reason to be
Right.
kept around, and all that. So, but yeah, that's the reality of it. I think it's like I guess it's like the last day in June, you have to have 105, it have to be trimmed by then. But I think a lot of those decisions may come quicker because coaches will try to do right by kids and say, hey,
Yeah,
we've seen spring practices, doesn't
this
look
is
good for you. We want you to be able to get into that late portal window and try to find somewhere else to go.
yeah. All right, Level. Appreciate the time, man. Good stuff as usual, and enjoy your home game against TCU and a road trip down to the Bayou City, I believe they call it, and
H Town. Yeah,
H
there you
Town.
go. Yeah.
So go continue the winning ways, and we'll be happy to talk to you again next week.
Hey, will you go continue your winning ways too, Woodman? I appreciate it.
I'll do my best.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. So I appreciate the folks at Cantex Roofing. Appreciate Woodman for sitting with me when we do these, and keep the questions coming. We'll try to answer them as best we can, and talk to everybody next time.
That's Chris Level. I'm Choice Woodman. Been tuned into the Ask Level podcast, brought to you by Double T 97.3.
You've been listening to the Ask Level podcast, powered by Double T 97.3.